To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Call. Paul Harper was reviewing quarterly security contracts when his phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Mercy General Hospital. He almost declined. Hospitals only called with bad news, but something made him answer. Mr. Harper? This is Nurse Virginia Riddle at Mercy General. Your son was in a car accident. You're listed as his emergency contact. Paul's grip tightened on the phone. I'm sorry, there's been a mistake. I don't have a son. A pause. Then, softer. Please, you have to see him. Room 314, ICU. He's been asking for you. The line went dead. Paul stared at his phone, mind racing. 15 years in military intelligence had taught him to trust his instincts, and every alarm bell was ringing. He'd been Paul Harper for 38 years. He knew his own life. No son. No ex-wife hiding a secret. No one-night stand from decades past. Yet something about the nurse's voice, that desperate whisper, made him grab his jacket. Mercy General's ICU smelled of antiseptic and desperation. Paul found room 314 easily enough. Through the glass, he saw a young man, maybe 20, hooked to monitors and 4 drips. Bandages covered half his face, but what Paul could see made his blood run cold. The boy looked exactly like Paul had at that age. Jesus, Paul breathed, pushing into the room. The young man's eyes opened, green eyes, the same shade as Paul's own. Dad, the word came out cracked, desperate. I knew you'd come. Paul's world tilted. The bone structure, the nose, even the way the kid's hair fell. It was like looking at a photograph from his academy days. But it was impossible. There had to be an explanation. What's your name, son? Paul asked gently, pulling up a chair. Troy. Troy Harper. The boy's hand found Paul's. I've been looking for you my whole life. Dr. Herman Riddle appeared in the doorway, a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes. Virginia's brother, apparently. The family resemblance was unmistakable. Mr. Harper? Could I speak with you privately? In the hallway, Dr. Riddle consulted his tablet. The accident was severe, multiple fractures, concussion, internal bleeding. We've stabilized him, but... He looked up. He's been very insistent about you being his father. Says his mother told him before she died last month. Who was his mother? Elizabeth Troy. Ring any bells? Paul searched his memory. Elizabeth Troy. The name meant nothing, but that didn't ease the knot in his stomach. Doctor, I need to ask a favor. I want a DNA test. Discreetly, Dr. Riddle nodded. I understand. We can have results in 24 hours. Paul returned to Troy's bedside. The boy was sleeping now, breathing steady but labored. Paul studied his face, looking for any detail that might break the uncanny resemblance. There was nothing. If this was some kind of setup, it was incredibly sophisticated. His phone buzzed. A text from his wife Carrie, working late again. Don't wait up. The same message she'd been sending 3 nights a week for the past 2 months. Paul had noticed, but hadn't questioned it. Their marriage had been growing distant lately. Now, sitting beside this impossible boy who claimed to be his son, Paul wondered what else he'd been blind to. Dad, Troy's eyes fluttered open again. I'm here. I wanted to tell you. I'm proud of you. What you built with Harper Security, how you help people. Mom showed me articles about you. Paul's company was successful but hardly famous. How would this kid know specifics unless he'd been specifically researching? What else did your mother tell you about me? That you were in the Army. Special Forces. That you met her during a mission in Bosnia, but you had to leave before you knew she was pregnant. Troy's eyes were earnest, desperate for belief. She said you would have stayed if you'd known. Paul's blood chilled. He had been in Bosnia in 2003, and the timeline would fit. But he'd never met anyone named Elizabeth Troy. Still, the details were too specific to be coincidence. Get some rest, Paul said. We'll talk more tomorrow. As he left the hospital, Paul's mind churned. The resemblance was impossible to fake, but the story felt rehearsed. Someone had done their homework, known about Bosnia, known about his company. But why? What did they want? He drove through the quiet streets of suburban Denver, his security training analyzing every detail. The call had come to his personal cell, not the office line. That number was known only to a handful of people. Carrie, his business partner Don Cooley, a few close friends. At home, Paul found Carrie's car missing from the garage. Working late, she'd said. He pulled up the security app on his phone. The cameras he'd installed last year as a test of his company's residential systems. The garage showed Carrie leaving at 3:47 p.m., not returning. Paul sat in his study, staring at a photo from their wedding 5 years ago. Carrie had been radiant, her smile genuine. When had things changed? When had she started pulling away? His phone rang. Don Cooley. Paul, we need to talk. Someone's been digging into our Bosnia contracts. Deep digging. Military records, classified stuff. Who? Don't know yet, but they're good. Professional. This isn't some amateur hour investigation. Paul closed his eyes. Don, I need you to run a background check. Full spectrum. Troy Harper, Elizabeth Troy, and... He hesitated. My wife. Silence on the line. Then, Jesus, Paul. What's going on? I wish I knew. Chapter 2. Unraveling Threads. Paul spent the night in his study, cross-referencing databases and military records. Elizabeth Troy remained a ghost. No social security number, no employment history, no death certificate. For someone who supposedly died last month, she'd left remarkably few traces. At 6 a.m., Don Cooley arrived with coffee and files. Paul's business partner was a former CIA analyst, methodical and paranoid by nature. Exactly what Paul needed. Your wife's clean on the surface, Don said, spreading documents across Paul's desk. But there are some interesting gaps. 3 months in 2019 she can't account for. Said she was caring for her sick mother in Oregon, but I checked. Her mother died in 2015. Paul studied Carrie's photo on their marriage license. What else? Financial records show regular cash withdrawals, always just under the reporting threshold. Started about 6 months ago. Don pulled out another file. And here's the kicker. She's been meeting someone. Alex Browning. Runs a private investigation firm, but not the kind that finds missing pets. The name meant nothing to Paul. Background. Ex-cop, discharged under investigation for evidence tampering. Now he specializes in corporate espionage, blackmail, real bottom-feeder stuff. Don's expression was grim. Paul, I think your wife's playing a deeper game than simple adultery. Paul's phone rang. Mercy General again. Mr. Harper? This is Dr. Riddle. Could you come in? There's been a development. At the hospital, Paul found Troy awake and more alert. The swelling had gone down, making the resemblance even more striking. Dr. Riddle led Paul to his office. The DNA results, the doctor said, handing over a sealed envelope. I ran them twice to be sure. Paul tore it open, scanned the technical jargon, and found the conclusion, 99.7% probability of paternal relationship. That's impossible, Paul said. DNA doesn't lie, Mr. Harper. According to science, Troy is definitely your biological son. Paul stared at the report. In 15 years of intelligence work, he'd learned that when something seemed impossible, you were missing crucial information. Doctor, I need another favor. I want a second opinion on this test. Independent lab, different samples. Dr. Riddle frowned. You think there's been an error? I think someone's playing a very dangerous game. Back in Troy's room, Paul found the young man sitting up, looking stronger. The test results came back, Paul said carefully. Troy's eyes lit up. And, according to the DNA, you're my son. Troy's smile was radiant, but Paul caught something else in his expression, relief, as if he'd been holding his breath. It lasted only a second, but Paul's training had taught him to notice micro-expressions. I knew it, Troy said. I always knew. Tell me about your mother. Everything you remember. For the next hour, Troy spun a detailed story about Elizabeth Troy, a nurse who'd met Paul during his deployment, a single mother who'd raised Troy alone while following Paul's career from afar. The details were consistent, emotional, and utterly convincing. They were also lies. Paul had never been involved in the mission Troy described. He'd checked his deployment records that morning. He'd been in Germany during the time frame when this supposed relationship had occurred. Troy, Paul said gently, I need to step out for a few minutes. I'll be right back. In the hallway, Paul called Dawn. I need surveillance on Alex Browning. Full coverage. And dig deeper into Troy's medical records. Who brought him in? Who authorized the DNA test? Everything. Paul, there's something else. I've been monitoring chatter in our networks. Someone's been asking questions about you. Specifically about your time in Bosnia and a weapons cache you helped recover. Paul's blood ran cold. The weapons cache had been classified above top secret. Chemical weapons that had supposedly been destroyed. If someone was asking about that mission, they weren't looking for a reunion. Dawn, I think we're dealing with more than a con game. This might be connected to our government work. I'll activate the safe house protocols. Watch your back, brother. Paul returned to Troy's room to find the boy on his phone, speaking quietly. Troy quickly ended the call when he saw Paul. Sorry, just calling a friend, Troy said, but Paul had caught a snippet of the conversation. He's starting to ask questions. Troy, who were you talking to? Just my roommate back in Seattle. Letting him know I'm okay. Another lie. Paul's enhanced hearing had caught the voice on the other end. Definitely not a college-aged roommate. The voice had been older, professional, with a slight accent Paul couldn't place. That evening, Paul sat in his car outside his house, watching. At 9:47 p.m., a black sedan pulled up. Paul recognized the driver from Don's surveillance photos, Alex Browning. Carrie emerged from the passenger side, straightened her dress, and kissed Browning before heading inside. Paul waited 10 minutes, then followed her in. Hey, honey, Carrie called from the kitchen, her voice bright and casual. How was your day? Interesting. Yours? Oh, the usual. Boring committee meetings at the country club. She moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, preparing her alibi. There's leftover casserole if you're hungry. Paul watched his wife, really watched her. 5 years of marriage, and he was seeing her clearly for the first time. The way she avoided direct eye contact, how her laugh was just a beat too loud, the nervous energy that suggested someone operating under stress. Carrie, we need to talk. She froze for just a moment. About what? I got a call today. From a hospital. About a son I supposedly have. Carrie's face went through a series of micro-expressions. Surprise, calculation, then carefully crafted concern. A son? Paul, that's impossible. We've been trying for years. The DNA test says otherwise. Now genuine fear flickered in her eyes. DNA test? Paul, what's going on? Paul studied her reaction. Either she was the world's best actress, or she wasn't fully in on whatever Alex Browning was planning. That made her either a co-conspirator or another victim. Carrie, I need you to tell me the truth. Have you been seeing someone? Silence stretched between them. Finally, tears began rolling down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Paul. I didn't mean for it to happen. Alex and it just... How long? 6 months. But Paul, I swear I don't know anything about a son. Alex never mentioned anything like that. Paul believed her tears, but not her words. 6 months matched the timeline of her cash withdrawals and mysterious meetings. Whatever Alex Browning was planning, Carrie was deeper in it than she was admitting. Pack a bag, Paul said quietly. What? Pack a bag. You're going to stay with your sister for a few days while I figure this out. Paul, you're scaring me. Good. Because someone's playing a very dangerous game, and I won't have you caught in the crossfire. As Carrie packed upstairs, Paul activated his home security system's lockdown protocol, a feature he'd installed but never expected to use. Hidden cameras, motion sensors, and automated alerts would turn his house into a fortress. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging or the boy dies. Paul smiled grimly. Now it was a real game. Chapter 3. The Setup. Paul drove Carrie to her sister's house at midnight, taking a circuitous route to check for surveillance. 2 cars followed them, professionals, but not quite good enough to stay invisible to someone with Paul's training. Paul, you're really freaking me out, Carrie said as they pulled into her sister's driveway. What aren't you telling me? The less you know, the safer you'll be. Paul handed her a prepaid phone. Use only this to contact me. And Carrie, don't trust Alex Browning. Whatever he's told you, whatever promises he's made, he's using you. Carrie's sister, Laura Mansfield, opened the door in her robe, immediately pulling Carrie into a protective embrace. Paul had always liked Laura. She was sharp, intuitive, and fiercely loyal to family. Laura, Carrie's in danger, Paul said bluntly. I can't explain everything, but someone's targeting me, and she's collateral damage. Keep her away from her phone. Don't let her contact anyone. And call me immediately if Alex Browning shows up. Laura's eyes sharpened. The private investigator? Paul, what has Carrie gotten herself into? That's what I'm going to find out. Back at the hospital, Paul found Troy's room under subtle surveillance. 2 men in the waiting area who looked like security but moved like soldiers. Paul entered through a service entrance, taking the stairs to avoid the main elevators. Troy was awake, staring at the ceiling. When he saw Paul, relief flooded his features. I was afraid you wouldn't come back, Troy said. Why would you think that? I don't know. I've been alone for so long. The idea that I might lose you already. Paul sat down, studying the boy's face. The resemblance was still uncanny, but now he looked for the subtle signs of deception he'd been trained to spot. Troy's story was too perfect, his emotions too calculated. Troy, I need you to tell me about the accident. Everything you remember. I was driving to see you. I'd finally worked up the courage to reach out, you know? I had your address, but when I got to your neighborhood, I got nervous. I was just driving around, trying to decide what to say. Troy's voice was steady, but his hands betrayed slight tremors. Then this SUV came out of nowhere. Black, with tinted windows. It hit me deliberately. I'm sure of it. Paul leaned forward. Deliberately? The driver. I only saw him for a second, but he looked right at me before impact, like he knew exactly who I was. Paul's mind raced. If Troy was telling the truth about the deliberate hit, it meant someone had wanted him in this hospital, injured and vulnerable. But was Troy a victim or a willing participant? Who knew you were coming to see me? Troy hesitated. Just one person. I called Alex Browning. He's a private investigator who helped me find you. He's the one who tracked down your address. Paul's blood chilled. Alex Browning helped you find me? Yeah, he was amazing. Said he specialized in reuniting families. He only charged half his usual fee because he felt bad for me, you know? Growing up without a father. Paul stood up abruptly. Troy wasn't just resembling him. Someone had surgically altered the boy's face. The work was subtle, but visible once you knew what to look for. Slight scarring near the hairline. Barely perceptible changes to the nose and cheekbones. Troy, I'll be right back. In the hallway, Paul called Dawn. Give me everything you can on recent facial reconstruction surgery in the Denver area. Someone's been playing Frankenstein. Jesus, Paul. You think they made the kid look like you? I think they found someone who already resembled me and refined the details. Check missing persons reports, runaway kids, anyone who might fit the profile. Paul returned to find Troy agitated, trying to sit up despite his injuries. Where did you go? You said you'd be right back. Just making some calls. Troy, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Has anyone ever suggested you get plastic surgery? Troy's face went blank. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Yes or no? No, of course not. Why would I need surgery? Paul pulled out his phone and showed Troy a photo of himself from 20 years ago. Look at this picture, then look in the mirror. Tell me you don't see the problem. Troy's eyes darted between the photo and his reflection in the dark window. Paul watched as realization dawned, and with it, genuine fear. Oh my God, Troy whispered. What did they do to me? For the first time since this began, Paul believed Troy's emotion was real. The boy wasn't a willing participant. He was another victim. Who approached you first? Think carefully. Before Alex Browning, before the DNA test, who first put the idea in your head that you might be my son? Troy closed his eyes, concentrating. There was this woman. About 6 months ago. She said she was writing a book about children of military personnel. She interviewed me about my mother, about growing up without knowing my father. She seemed so nice, so understanding. What was her name? Melody Eddy. She said she was a freelance journalist. Paul made a note. Another name to trace. What did you tell her? Everything. About Mom dying. About the few clues she'd left about my father. About how I'd always felt this hole in my life. Troy's voice cracked. She's the one who suggested I might be able to find him. She even recommended Alex Browning. The pieces were clicking into place. Someone had identified Troy as a lonely, vulnerable young man with the right basic look and background. They'd fed him a story, refined his appearance, and set him up as bait. Troy, I need you to listen carefully. You're not my biological son. The DNA test was faked, probably by switching samples. Someone has used you as part of an elaborate setup targeting me. Troy's face crumpled. So you're not my father? No, but that doesn't mean I'm going to abandon you. Someone has hurt both of us, and we're going to make them pay. Paul's phone buzzed. Don's name on the screen. Paul, we've got problems. Alex Browning just emptied his bank accounts and booked a flight to the Caymans. But here's the kicker. He's not working alone. I found connections to Omar Sutton. Paul's blood ran cold. Omar Sutton was a name from his past, a black market arms dealer he'd helped put away during the Bosnia mission. Sutton had sworn revenge before disappearing into the federal prison system. When did Sutton get out? 8 months ago. Looks like he's been planning this for a while. Paul looked at Troy, who was watching him with growing fear. Don, how fast can you get to the hospital? I think we're about to have company. 10 minutes. Paul, get out of there now. Not without Troy. Someone's already tried to kill him once. I won't leave him here as a sitting duck. Paul moved to Troy's bedside. Can you walk? I think so, but the doctors said. The doctors aren't trying to keep you alive right now. I am. Paul helped Troy into a wheelchair, grabbed the boy's few belongings, and headed for the service elevator. As the doors closed, he saw 3 men in suits entering the main lobby. 2 well-dressed for visitors, 2 alert for grieving relatives. In the basement garage, Paul transferred Troy to his car just as Don's vehicle squealed around the corner. Don rolled down his window. Safe house is compromised, Don called out. Sutton's people got there first. We need Plan B. Paul had prepared for this possibility. The cabin. Already secured. Go. I'll handle cleanup here. As Paul drove through the night toward the mountain cabin he'd bought years ago as a paranoia-fueled retreat, Troy sat silent in the passenger seat. I'm sorry, Troy finally said. I never meant for any of this to happen. You were used, kid. That's not your fault. Paul glanced at the rearview mirror. Clean so far. But now you're going to help me turn the tables. How? Paul smiled grimly. Omar Sutton thinks he's playing chess, but he's about to learn that I prefer a more direct approach. We're going to give him exactly what he wants, and make him regret ever wanting it. Troy was quiet for a moment. What exactly do you do for a living? I solve problems. And right now, Omar Sutton is a very big problem that needs solving. Chapter 4. The Hunter Becomes Hunted. The mountain cabin sat on 40 acres of Colorado wilderness, surrounded by early warning systems that would make NORAD jealous. Paul had built it as a retirement dream, but now it served as a fortress. Troy slept fitfully on the couch while Paul worked through the night, cross-referencing intelligence databases and old mission files. Omar Sutton's face stared back from a classified document, a thin man with dead eyes and surgical scars along his jaw from a grenade blast Paul had caused during their last encounter. Don arrived at dawn with surveillance equipment and bad news. Sutton's not just after revenge, Don said, spreading photos across the kitchen table. He's after the Sarajevo cache. Paul studied the images, satellite photos of a warehouse in Bosnia, shipping manifests, financial records. The weapons cache they'd seized 15 years ago had supposedly been destroyed, but Paul had always suspected otherwise. You think the government kept samples? I think someone kept everything. Chemical weapons, biological agents, enough to supply a dozen terrorist organizations. Don pulled out another file. 3 days ago, someone accessed the classified storage facility. Used your security codes. Paul's coffee mug hit the table hard enough to wake Troy. That's impossible. My codes were deactivated when I left the service. Unless someone inside reactivated them. Paul, I think this goes deeper than Sutton. Someone in our own government is playing both sides. Troy stirred on the couch, wincing as his injuries reminded him of their reality. What's the Sarajevo cache? Paul and Don exchanged glances. How much should they tell a civilian caught in the crossfire? Chemical weapons we intercepted during the Bosnian conflict, Paul said finally. Supposed to be destroyed, but apparently someone had other plans. Troy sat up slowly. And this Sutton guy thinks you still have access to them? Or that I know where they really are? Paul pulled up a map on his laptop. The question is, why now? Sutton's been in prison for 8 years. What's changed? Don's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then hung up with a grim expression. Alex Browning didn't make it to the Caymans. His body was found in his office 20 minutes ago. Single gunshot to the head, professional execution. Paul felt the pieces shifting in his mind. Sutton's cleaning house. Anyone who can connect him to this operation is a liability. Which means Carrie's in danger, Troy said quietly. Paul nodded. Carrie might not have been fully aware of the conspiracy, but she'd been Alex Browning's lover and confidant. If Sutton was eliminating loose ends, she was next on the list. Paul tried calling Laura's house. No answer. He tried Carrie's new phone. Straight to voicemail. Don, we need to move now. The drive to Laura's house took 25 minutes through mountain roads. Paul pushed his SUV to its limits while Don coordinated with local law enforcement. Troy sat in the back seat, gripping the door handle as they took corners at dangerous speeds. There, Don pointed as they rounded the final curve. Laura's house sat quiet in the morning light, but Paul's trained eye caught the details wrong. Front door ajar, Newspapers piling up, Laura's car in the driveway, but Carrie's rental nowhere to be seen. Paul parked a block away. Don, circle around back. Troy, stay with the vehicle and be ready to call 911. I'm coming with you, Troy insisted. You're injured and untrained. You'll get us all killed. Paul moved toward the house with practiced stealth, senses hyper-alert. The front door had been forced, subtle damage to the frame that suggested professional entry. Inside, the house was too quiet. He found Laura in the kitchen, tied to a chair but conscious. Her eyes widened with relief when she saw him. Paul, thank God. They took Carrie about an hour ago. Paul cut her restraints. How many of them? 3 men. Professional, like you see in movies. They asked questions about you, what you did in the military, where you might go if you were hiding. Laura rubbed her wrists. Carrie tried to protect you. She kept saying she didn't know anything useful. Did they say where they were taking her? One of them mentioned a warehouse. Something about making you come to them. Paul's phone rang. Unknown number. Harper. He put it on speaker. Paul Harper. We finally meet again. The voice was accented, precise. Omar Sutton. Omar. I was wondering when you'd crawl out from whatever rock you'd been hiding under. 15 years, Harper. 15 years I've waited for this moment. You cost me everything. My business, my freedom, my face. The hatred in Sutton's voice was palpable. But now I have something you want. I'm listening. Your wife is enjoying my hospitality. For now. But my patience has limits. What do you want, Omar? The Sarajevo cache. The real location, not the cover story you fed the Pentagon. I know you kept records, Harper. Your type always does. Paul looked at Don and Troy, both listening intently. And if I give you what you want, then your wife dies quickly instead of slowly. I'm afraid there's no scenario where she walks away from this, old friend. Too many people would ask uncomfortable questions. The line went dead. Laura had gone pale. Paul, what is he talking about? It's complicated. Paul was already moving, checking his weapons, planning their next move. Laura, pack a bag. You're coming with us until this is over. I'm not leaving my house because of some terrorist. You are if you want to live. These people don't leave witnesses. Don was studying satellite images on his phone. I think I know where they are. There's an abandoned industrial complex outside Aurora, perfect for this kind of operation. Troy stood up despite his injuries. I'm coming with you. Like hell you are. Paul, listen to me. I may not be your real son, but these people used me, hurt me, turned me into a weapon against you. I deserve a chance to help take them down. Paul studied the young man's face. Troy's resemblance to him was artificial, but the steel in his eyes was genuine. Despite everything he'd been through, he was ready to fight. Can you handle a gun? I grew up in Wyoming. I've been hunting since I was 12. Don pulled a spare pistol from his bag. Crash course in urban warfare. Rule 1, stay behind us. Rule 2, shoot only when you have a clear target. Rule 3, when I say move, you move. As they prepared for what would likely be a suicide mission, Paul's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Carrie, bound and blindfolded in what looked like a warehouse office. The message read, "You have 2 hours. Come alone or she dies screaming." Paul showed the photo to Don, who shook his head. It's a trap, brother. Classic setup. I know, but I can't let her die because of my past. Then we don't play by their rules. Don pulled up building schematics on his tablet. 3-pronged assault. You go in the front like they expect. Troy and I come through the loading dock. We time it perfectly, create enough chaos to get Carrie out. Paul looked at his unlikely team, his paranoid ex-CIA partner, a surgically altered young man seeking redemption, and himself, against a professional terrorist with military resources and nothing to lose. Gentlemen, Paul said, checking his ammunition, this is either going to be the shortest rescue mission in history or the most satisfying revenge. Troy chambered around with practiced ease. Either way, let's make them regret messing with us. Chapter 5, The Devil's Bargain. The abandoned Aurora Industrial Complex squatted like a concrete cancer on 20 acres of wasteland. Paul studied it through binoculars from a ridge half a mile away, counting guards, noting patrol patterns, marking exits. 12 visible sentries, he reported to Don and Troy. Professional spacing, military discipline. These aren't street thugs. Don adjusted his scope. I count at least 6 sniper positions. This isn't just a hostage situation, it's a fortress. Troy winced as he shifted position, his injuries still tender. The building in the photo, that's the main office complex, right? Paul nodded. Third floor, northeast corner. But getting there means crossing 200 yards of open ground under crossfire. Not if we create the right distraction, Don mused, studying the facility's power grid. I could take out their electricity, maybe start a fire in the chemical storage building. In the chaos. Too many variables, Paul interrupted. If something goes wrong, Carrie dies. His phone rang. Sutton again. Having second thoughts, Harper? Just admiring your setup. Very thorough. I learned from the best. Your military taught me much about warfare during my imprisonment. Sutton's voice carried dark amusement. But I also learned about you. Your psychological profile makes for fascinating reading. Paul kept his voice level. Is that so? Hero complex, they called it. Inability to abandon teammates, even at tactical disadvantage. It's what made you an effective soldier, and what makes you predictable now. Paul closed his eyes. Sutton was right. He'd walked into obvious traps before when lives were at stake. It was both his greatest strength and most exploitable weakness. The cache location, Harper. Give it to me, and I'll make this quick. I need to see proof Carrie's alive first. Check your phone. The video that arrived showed Carrie in the warehouse office, conscious but terrified. She was trying to say something, but the audio was muted. Paul watched her lips carefully. She was mouthing, "It's a trap," over and over. Even in captivity, she was still trying to protect him. You have 1 hour, Sutton said. Come to the main entrance alone. Any deviation from my instructions, and I'll send you pieces of your wife every 10 minutes until you comply. The line went dead. Don was shaking his head. Paul, you can't seriously be considering this. I can't abandon her. You can't save her either. The moment you give Sutton what he wants, you're both dead. Then he disappears with enough chemical weapons to kill half the eastern seaboard. Troy spoke up quietly. What if we don't give him what he wants? What if we give him what he expects? Both men looked at him. Explain, Paul said. You said the cache was supposed to be destroyed, right? What if it actually was, but Sutton doesn't know that? What if we convince him you have information you don't actually have? Paul felt a spark of possibility. Go on. We make him think you're willing to deal, but only on your terms. Demand a prisoner exchange in neutral territory. Force him to move Carrie out of his fortress. Don was nodding slowly. Could work. But we'd need leverage. Something Sutton wants more than revenge. Paul thought back to the Bosnia mission, to the intelligence they'd gathered before raiding Sutton's operation. There had been something else. Financial records, offshore accounts, the location of Sutton's accumulated wealth. I know where he hid his money, Paul said suddenly. 200 million in gold and art, buried in a Swiss vault. He thinks the government seized it, but we never found it. So you offer him a trade, his money for your wife. And then, Don smiled grimly. Then we take both. Paul called Sutton back. This time he was ready to negotiate. Omar, I've got a counter-proposal. You're hardly in a position to make demands, Harper. Au contraire. You want the cache location? I want your Swiss account numbers. We both have something the other needs. Silence on the line. Paul could almost hear Sutton's mind working. What Swiss accounts? The ones you established through your shell companies in Zurich. The ones containing proceeds from 15 years of arms dealing. The accounts you think the American government seized, but actually just hid from you. More silence. Paul was gambling that Sutton's greed would override his caution. Even if such accounts existed, Sutton said carefully, why would you know about them? Because I'm the one who found them. And I'm the only one who knows the access codes you'll need to retrieve your money after all these years. You're bluffing. Paul rattled off a 12-digit number, the first of 3 account access codes he'd memorized 15 years ago. Don looked at him with surprise. Paul had never mentioned knowing about Sutton's hidden fortune. That's impossible, Sutton breathed. Bank Lou, Zurich. Account holder listed as Meridian Holdings. Limited current balance approximately $87 million, plus interest. Want the other 2 account numbers? Paul could hear heated discussion in the background, Sutton arguing with his associates. Money was apparently a bigger motivator than revenge for some of them. What do you propose? Sutton asked finally. Neutral ground. Denver International Airport, main terminal. Public place, lots of witnesses. You bring Carrie, I bring the account information and cache location. We make the exchange simultaneously. And then we walk away. You get your money and your weapons, I get my wife. Clean break. Don was making cutting motions across his throat, but Paul ignored him. This was their only chance. You have 30 minutes to reach the airport, Sutton said. Terminal level, south end, near the car rental counters. Come alone. Paul hung up and turned to his team. You heard the plan. Don, I need you to contact airport security, explain the situation without mentioning the weapons cache. Troy, you're with me, but at a distance. If this goes wrong, it's definitely going wrong, Don interrupted. Sutton's not planning to honor any deal. He'll kill you both and disappear. Probably. But at least we'll be away from his fortress and in a public place. Better odds for rescue. Worse odds for him to escape cleanly. They drove toward Denver in 2 vehicles, Don hanging back to avoid detection. Paul's mind raced through contingencies, backup plans, emergency signals. He'd done hostage exchanges before, but never with such personal stakes. Troy rode shotgun, repeatedly checking his concealed pistol. Paul, can I ask you something? Shoot. Why are you trusting me? For all you know, I'm still working with them. Paul considered the question. Because you had a chance to warn Sutton about our surveillance, and you didn't. Because you could have killed me in that hospital room if you'd wanted to. And because sometimes you have to trust your instincts about people. What do your instincts tell you about me? Paul glanced at the young man who'd been surgically altered to resemble him. That you're angry, scared, and looking for someone to believe in. That makes you either very dangerous or very useful. Which one am I? I guess we'll find out in about 20 minutes. As Denver International Airport came into view, Paul's phone buzzed with a final text from Sutton. No tricks, Harper. I have 6 men in that terminal, and they all have orders to kill your wife at the first sign of deception. Paul showed the message to Troy. Ready for this? As ready as someone can be for walking into a death trap with a man I've known for 2 days. Paul smiled grimly. Kid, if we survive this, I'm adopting you for real. You've got the right attitude for this family. Chapter 6. Blood and Betrayal. Denver International Airport buzzed with typical mid-afternoon chaos. Travelers rushing to catch flights, families reuniting, business people barking into phones. The perfect cover for a clandestine exchange. Paul walked through the main terminal alone, every sense hyper-alert. Troy was positioned near the food court, pretending to read a newspaper while watching the south entrance. Don had coordinated with airport security to have plainclothes officers scattered throughout the area, but they'd been told only that a domestic dispute might escalate to violence. Paul spotted them immediately, Sutton's men, trying to blend in but betrayed by their tactical awareness and identical haircuts. 6 of them, just as promised, positioned to cover all exits. At exactly 3:30 p.m., Omar Sutton appeared near the car rental counters. 15 years had not been kind to him. The left side of his face was a mass of surgical scars, his eye socket reconstructed but clearly artificial. He moved with a slight limp, another souvenir from their last encounter. But his remaining eye burned with undimmed hatred. Carrie walked beside him, hands zip-tied behind her back, a small man with dead eyes holding a knife to her ribs. She looked terrified but unharmed. Paul approached slowly, hands visible and empty. Omar, you look exactly like I expected. 15 years of skin grafts and bone reconstruction. Your handiwork. Sutton's voice was cold, professional. But I've had time to plan this moment. Every detail. Every contingency. The Swiss accounts first, Paul said. Show me Carrie's alive and well, then I'll give you what you want. Sutton nodded to his associate, who loosened his grip slightly. Carrie looked up at Paul with desperate eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. We'll sort it out later, Paul said gently. Then, louder, the account numbers, Omar. Meridian Holdings, Avalon Enterprises, and Phoenix Trading Corporation. Zurich, Geneva, and Lugano respectively. A total of $230 million, plus 15 years of interest. Paul could see the greed in Sutton's scarred features. Money trumped revenge, at least temporarily. And the cash location? Bosnia. Warehouse District in Sarajevo. Coordinates 43.8563 degrees north, 18.4131 degrees east. Underground bunker, accessible through the old sewage treatment facility. Sutton pulled out a satellite phone and barked coordinates to someone. Paul caught enough of the conversation to understand that Sutton had a team standing by in Bosnia, ready to verify the location. It will take 6 hours to confirm your information, Sutton said. Until then, your wife remains my guest. That wasn't the deal. The deal was you give me what I want. I want confirmation before I release anything. Paul had expected this. Then we wait together. Public place, lots of witnesses. Your men can keep us covered, but no one moves until your team in Bosnia confirms the location. Sutton considered this. Paul could see him weighing variables. The public setting made violence risky, but 6 hours gave him time to plan a cleaner execution. Very well. But Harper, any tricks, any attempt to signal for help, and your wife dies slowly. They took seats in the terminal waiting area, a surreal tableau of international terrorism playing out among delayed flights and overpriced coffee shops. Sutton's men maintained their positions while the man with the knife stayed close to Carrie. Paul's phone buzzed. A text from Troy. 6 men, all armed. Don has airport security ready to move on your signal. Paul deleted the message without responding. Any sign of outside coordination would trigger the massacre Sutton was clearly planning. For 2 hours, they waited. Paul studied his enemies, memorizing faces, noting weapons placement, calculating angles of attack. Sutton did the same, both predators recognizing each other's lethal potential. At 5:47 p.m., Sutton's satellite phone rang. Yes. He listened intently, his scarred face growing darker with each word. Are you certain? Check again. Paul watched Sutton's expression change from anticipation to confusion to rage. The location is empty, Sutton said quietly. A hole in the ground where a bunker should be. My men found excavation marks, evidence of recent construction. Someone beat us there. Paul kept his expression neutral. Maybe your intelligence was wrong. Or maybe you lied to me. Sutton's artificial eye fixed on Paul with mechanical precision. But I prepared for that possibility. The man with the knife pressed it deeper into Carrie's side, drawing a thin line of blood through her shirt. Last chance, Harper. The real location. Paul stood slowly, hands still visible. Omar, I gave you the coordinates from the original mission briefing. If someone else got there first, that's not my fault. But it is your problem. The knife moved toward Carrie's throat. Paul tensed, ready to launch himself forward despite the impossible odds. That's when Troy made his move. The young man had been watching from across the terminal, waiting for the perfect moment. As Sutton's attention focused on Paul, Troy approached from behind, moving with surprising stealth for someone with recent injuries. But Troy didn't attack Sutton. Instead, he walked up to the man holding Carrie and said loudly, Uncle Omar, you said you'd buy me a souvenir when we got here. Every head turned. The man with the knife looked confused, his grip loosening just enough for Carrie to twist away. Run, Paul shouted, diving toward Sutton as chaos erupted around them. The terminal exploded into panic. Travelers screamed and scattered as Sutton's men reached for concealed weapons. Airport security rushed in from multiple directions, alerted by Don's prepositioned team. Paul tackled Sutton to the ground, both men fighting for control. Sutton was older and injured, but desperation made him dangerous. They rolled across the floor, grappling for Sutton's concealed pistol. Troy had grabbed Carrie and was pulling her toward the security checkpoint, shouting bomb. There's a bomb, to create maximum chaos and evacuation. Don appeared at Paul's side, service weapon drawn. Paul, get clear. But Sutton had managed to draw his gun, pointing it not at Paul, but at the fleeing crowd. One more step, and I start shooting civilians. The standoff lasted 3 seconds. Then Paul made the decision that defined who he was. He threw himself between Sutton's gun and the innocent bystanders, just as the terrorist pulled the trigger. The bullet caught Paul in the shoulder, spinning him around, but not stopping him. He crashed into Sutton again, this time with Don's help, finally subduing the man who terrorized his family. Airport security and FBI agents swarmed the scene, arresting Sutton's associates and securing the area. Paramedics attended to Paul's shoulder wound while he watched Carrie embrace Troy like the son she'd never had. Don appeared at Paul's side as the medic finished bandaging his shoulder. All 6 men in custody. Sutton's talking, trying to cut a deal. Apparently, this whole operation was funded by someone else, someone with access to government intelligence and offshore accounts. Paul looked up sharply. Someone inside? Looks like it. The Swiss bank accounts you mentioned? They were emptied 3 months ago by someone with State Department credentials. Paul's mind raced. If someone in the government had been financing Sutton's revenge plot, using stolen funds to pay for an elaborate setup involving facial surgery, fake DNA tests, and professional mercenaries. Don, we need to trace those credentials. And we need to do it fast, before whoever's really behind this realizes their operation failed. Carrie approached, her face streaked with tears. Paul, I'm so sorry. About Alex, about the lies, about everything. Paul looked at his wife, really looked at her. The terror in her eyes was genuine, but there was something else. Relief. Not just at being rescued, but at something deeper. Carrie, how did Sutton know about the Swiss accounts? She blinked. What do you mean? I never told anyone about those accounts. Not Don, not my superiors, not you. So how did Sutton know to ask about his hidden money? Carrie's face went pale. I don't know. Maybe he guessed. Paul studied his wife's micro-expressions, the slight tells he'd been trained to spot in enemy operatives. The way she avoided direct eye contact, how her breathing had changed, the defensive positioning of her shoulders. You knew, he said quietly. About the accounts, about Sutton, about all of it. Troy looked between them, confusion clear on his surgically altered face. Don's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. Paul, what are you saying? Carrie whispered. I'm saying someone's been playing a very long game. And I think I'm finally starting to understand the rules. Chapter 7. The Long Game. The FBI conference room smelled of stale coffee and institutional desperation. Paul sat across from Agent Sidney Green, his wounded shoulder aching despite the painkillers. 2 days had passed since the airport confrontation, and the investigation had yielded disturbing revelations. Sutton's been very cooperative, Agent Green said, spreading files across the table. Apparently, he was contracted for this operation. Someone else planned it, funded it, and provided the intelligence. Paul studied the financial records. The Swiss accounts? Emptied by someone with State Department access codes. But here's the interesting part. The money was withdrawn by a woman using your wife's passport. Paul felt the ground shift beneath him. That's impossible. Carrie was here in Denver. Was she? According to these records, Carrie Harper was in Zurich 3 months ago, accessing accounts that officially don't exist. Agent Green pulled out surveillance photos from a Swiss bank. The woman in the images had Carrie's face, her hair, her general build. But something about the posture was wrong, the way she moved. Facial recognition software says it's your wife. But our behavioral analyst disagrees. Different gait pattern, different hand dominance, subtle differences in facial expressions. Paul leaned forward. Plastic surgery again? That's our theory. Someone underwent extensive reconstruction to impersonate your wife, then used forged State Department credentials to access classified financial records. The pieces were clicking into place in Paul's mind. The whole Sutton operation was a distraction. Someone wanted me focused on an old enemy while they used my wife's identity to steal government assets. But who has that kind of access? And why target you specifically? Paul's phone buzzed. Don's name on the display. Paul, you need to get down here now. I found something in Carrie's personal files that changes everything. Paul met Don at Harper Security's downtown office. Troy was there too, looking more alert despite his healing injuries. The young man had insisted on helping with the investigation, claiming he owed Paul for saving his life. What did you find? Paul asked. Don led them to a secure conference room where Carrie's laptop sat open, its contents displayed on a large monitor. I've been going through her digital footprint with a fine-tooth comb, Don explained. Most of it's normal, social media, shopping, emails to her sister. But then I found this. The screen showed an encrypted messaging application Paul didn't recognize. Don clicked through a series of conversations that made Paul's blood run cold. Subject C is becoming suspicious. Recommend accelerating timeline. Swiss accounts accessed successfully. Primary funds transferred to Cayman Holdings. Sutton operation approved. Subject C must be neutralized after retrieval. Subject C, Paul said quietly. C for Carrie? Or C for Claude? Don replied. Paul's given name, known only to family and close friends. Troy spoke up. Paul, look at the dates. These messages go back 8 months. Before I was even contacted by Melody Eddy. Paul studied the timestamps. The conspiracy had been planned almost a year in advance, with meticulous attention to detail. Someone had been watching him, learning his patterns, identifying his weaknesses. The DNA tests, Paul said suddenly. Don, pull up Troy's medical records from the hospital. Don typed rapidly. Here. But Paul, these look legitimate. Look closer. Who authorized the tests? Who processed the samples? Don's expression darkened. Dr. Herman Riddle. But we verified his credentials. Did we verify his relationship to Nurse Virginia Riddle? Or did we just assume they were siblings because they had the same last name? Paul pulled out his phone and called Mercy General Hospital. This is Paul Harper. I need to speak with Dr. Herman Riddle immediately. I'm sorry, sir, but Dr. Riddle doesn't work here. We have no doctor by that name on staff. Paul hung up and looked at his team. The hospital was compromised from the beginning. Fake doctor, probably fake nurse too. They could have manipulated the DNA samples, the medical records, everything. Troy paled. You mean the whole hospital thing was staged? Not the whole hospital. Just the key personnel involved in your case. Paul was thinking rapidly. Someone with serious resources and government connections orchestrated this entire operation. Don pulled up more files. Paul, I think I know who we're dealing with. Look at this. The screen showed a personnel file for Corinne Jefferson, Deputy Director of Covert Operations, State Department. A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of face that suggested she'd seen too much and forgiven too little. I've never heard of her, Paul said, because she specializes in operations that officially never happen. Black budgets, off-books assassinations, the kind of work that keeps democracy safe by abandoning democratic principles. Paul studied Jefferson's photo. There was something familiar about her features, but he couldn't place it. Don, what's her connection to the Bosnia mission? She was intelligence liaison for the Balkan operations. Officially, she coordinated between military and civilian agencies. Unofficially, Don pulled up classified documents. She was in charge of securing high-value assets for future use. Including chemical weapons? Including everything. The weapons cache you thought was destroyed? Jefferson had it moved to a classified facility. She's been sitting on enough biochemical weapons to supply a small war. Troy leaned forward. So why target Paul? If she already has the weapons, what does she need from him? Paul felt the answer crystallizing in his mind. Deniability. If those weapons ever surface, she needs someone to blame. A rogue operative who went off the reservation, stole government assets, and sold them to terrorists. You, Don said. Me. The perfect fall guy. Decorated veteran with a mysterious past and convenient access to classified information. Paul stood up, pacing as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. She's been setting me up for months. The fake son was meant to destabilize me emotionally, make me act irrationally. The Sutton operation was supposed to end with my death, making me a martyred hero who died fighting terrorism while secretly being the real villain. Don was nodding grimly. And Carrie, either a willing conspirator or another victim. But given those encrypted messages, Paul trailed off. Troy looked confused. But the woman in Switzerland couldn't have been Carrie. You said the behavioral analysis showed differences. Because it wasn't Carrie, Paul said suddenly. It was someone surgically altered to look like her. Just like they altered you to look like me. The realization hit all three men simultaneously. Corinne Jefferson, Don breathed. She had plastic surgery to impersonate Carrie. Paul pulled up Jefferson's photo again, studying the bone structure, the eye placement, the general facial geometry. With surgical modification, the resemblance could be striking. She's been planning this for years. Created a fake identity, stole millions in government funds, and orchestrated an elaborate frame job that would destroy me while enriching her. Don was already typing, cross-referencing surgical records and travel documents. Paul, we need to move fast. If Jefferson realizes her operation failed, she'll disappear with those weapons and enough money to live like a queen wherever she lands. Where is she now? According to State Department records, she's on administrative leave. But her last known location was. Don paused, checking multiple databases. Her suburban Virginia home, purchased under a shell company 6 months ago. Paul checked his watch. We can be in Virginia in 4 hours. But this isn't a job for civilians anymore. We need to contact the FBI, get official support. Paul, Troy said quietly, what about Carrie? Is she part of this or another victim? Paul looked at his phone, where 17 missed calls from his wife waited. He'd been avoiding her since the airport, unsure what to believe. Only one way to find out. He dialed Carrie's number. She answered on the first ring. Paul, thank God. Where are you? I've been worried sick. I'm at the office. Carrie, we need to talk. About Alex Browning. About the encrypted messages on your laptop. About everything. Silence on the line. Then, what encrypted messages? Either she was genuinely confused or the world's best actress. Come to the office. Now. And Carrie? Come alone. Paul hung up and looked at his team. Gentlemen, in about 20 minutes we're going to find out whether my wife is an innocent victim or a co-conspirator in international terrorism. Either way, this ends tonight. Chapter 8. Truth and Consequences. Carrie arrived at Harper Securities' offices 37 minutes later, her face drawn with exhaustion and fear. Paul watched her through the security monitors as she approached the building. No tale, no unusual behavior, just a terrified woman who'd been through hell. She entered the conference room where Paul, Don, and Troy waited, her eyes immediately going to the laptop displaying the encrypted messages. I've never seen that before in my life, she said immediately. Paul studied her micro-expressions. After 15 years of reading people, he believed her. Sit down, Carrie. We need to understand what's been happening to both of us. For the next hour, Paul walked her through the entire conspiracy, the fake son, the Swiss accounts, the government official who'd orchestrated everything. Carrie listened with growing horror, occasionally interrupting with questions that convinced Paul she was genuinely ignorant of the larger plot. So Alex was using me, she said finally. Everything he told me, everything I felt for him, it was all part of this woman's plan. It looks that way. Jefferson needed someone close to me, someone who could provide intelligence about my routines, my emotional triggers, my vulnerabilities. Carrie's face crumpled. I'm so sorry, Paul. I betrayed you for a man who was just using me to destroy you. Troy spoke up softly. Join the club. I thought I was finding my father. Turns out I was just a weapon in someone else's war. Don's computer chimed with an alert. Paul, we've got a problem. Corinne Jefferson just boarded a private jet at Dulles Airport. Flight plan shows the Cayman Islands, but that could be misdirection. Paul stood up. We need to move now. Don, contact Agent Green. Tell him everything we've discovered. Troy, I'm coming with you. Troy interrupted. Absolutely not. You're still recovering from surgery and a car accident. Paul, this woman destroyed my life. Used me like a puppet. I deserve a chance to confront her. You deserve a chance to live a normal life. Going after Jefferson is military work, not civilian justice. Carrie stood up. I'm coming too. Both men looked at her in surprise. Alex used me to hurt you, she continued. Jefferson manipulated me into betraying my own husband. I won't hide while you clean up my mess. Paul shook his head. Carrie, this isn't about guilt or redemption. Jefferson is a professional operative with military training and nothing to lose. She'll kill anyone who threatens her. Then maybe it's time someone threatened her back. Don looked up from his computer. Paul, we may not have a choice. Jefferson's plane just changed course. She's not heading for the Caymans. She's coming back here. Why would she? Paul stopped, realization dawning. Because she can't disappear while we're still alive. We know too much, have too much evidence. She needs to finish the job. Don pulled up flight tracking data. She'll land at a private airfield outside Denver in 90 minutes. Paul, she's bringing the fight to us. Paul's mind raced through tactical options. Jefferson would come prepared for war, probably with a team of mercenaries and access to the chemical weapons she'd stolen. Harper Securities' office building was defensible, but not impregnable. We evacuate, Paul decided. Get everyone out of the building, fall back to the mountain cabin. She'll follow us there, Don pointed out. Good. Better to face her on ground I've prepared than wait for her to choose the battlefield. As they gathered files and weapons, Paul's phone rang. Unknown number. Harper. He put it on speaker. Mr. Harper, this is Corinne Jefferson. I believe we have much to discuss. Jefferson's voice was crisp, professional, with just a hint of Southern accent. Paul could hear aircraft engines in the background. I'm listening. You've been very thorough in your investigation. Almost impressive for a washed-up military contractor. Flattery will get you nowhere, Corinne. What do you want? I want to offer you a deal. You return the financial records you've stolen, forget everything you've learned about my operations, and I'll let you live. Your wife and your pretend son can even join you in whatever exile you choose. Paul looked at his team. And if I refuse? Then you'll learn why the State Department pays me so well to solve problems quietly. I have resources at my disposal that would make Omar Sutton look like a street thug. Chemical weapons, you mean? A pause. Among other things. But Paul, may I call you Paul? I prefer not to use such drastic measures. Too many innocent casualties, too much cleanup required. How humanitarian of you. I'm a pragmatist. Dead heroes become martyrs, and martyrs ask uncomfortable questions. Better to have you simply disappear, along with anyone who might corroborate your wild theories about government conspiracy. Paul was buying time, letting Don trace the call and coordinate with federal authorities. You made one mistake, Corinne. Oh, what's that? You assumed I'd run. But I don't abandon people under my protection. Jefferson laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Mr. Harper, you're about to learn the difference between military bravado and political reality. I have authorization for this operation at the highest levels. Whatever happens tonight will be classified as a terrorist incident. My response will be deemed appropriate, and you'll be posthumously blamed for stealing government assets. Maybe, but I'll make sure the truth comes out. Will you? Because in about 60 minutes, I'm going to demonstrate why certain truths are too dangerous for public consumption. The line went dead. Don looked up from his computer. She's landing at Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. That gives us maybe 40 minutes before she reaches the city. Paul checked his weapons, his mind switching to combat mode. Don, get Agent Green and his team to the cabin. Full tactical support. Carrie, Troy, you're going to a safe house until this is over. Like hell, Troy said. This isn't a debate. You're right, it isn't. Troy chambered a round in his pistol. You told me I wasn't your real son. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. And sons don't abandon their fathers when the shooting starts. Carrie nodded agreement. For better or worse, Paul. Isn't that what we promised each other? Paul looked at his unlikely family, his unfaithful but ultimately loyal wife, the surgically altered young man who'd chosen him as a father figure, and his paranoid but dependable business partner. Not the team he'd have chosen for facing a rogue government operative, but the team he had. All right, he said, but we do this my way. Military discipline. Follow orders, no heroics. Don was gathering equipment. Paul, what's the plan? Paul studied the tactical map of his mountain property, noting defensive positions, escape routes, and potential ambush sites. We're going to give Corinne Jefferson exactly what she wants, a chance to finish this personally. But on ground I've prepared, with backup she doesn't know about, and with a surprise she won't see coming. What surprise? Paul smiled grimly. The chemical weapons she thinks she controls? They never left government custody. I've been in contact with their actual custodians all along. Troy looked confused. You mean? I mean Corinne Jefferson is about to learn that stealing imaginary weapons is a lot easier than explaining to a Senate committee why you tried to frame a decorated veteran for your own crimes. Paul's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The mountains look beautiful tonight. Such a shame about what's going to happen there. Paul showed the message to his team, then replied, Come and get me, Corinne. I'll be waiting. The response came immediately. I'm counting on it. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. The mountain cabin sat in darkness, every security system activated and recording. Paul watched the approach roads through thermal imaging while Don coordinated with the FBI tactical team positioned 2 miles away. Carrie and Troy occupied defensive positions on the second floor, armed and ready despite their lack of formal training. Movement on the North Ridge, Don reported. For vehicles, probably 8 to 12 personnel. Paul adjusted his night vision scope. Jefferson had come prepared for war, SUVs with military modifications, personnel moving with professional discipline. But she'd made one crucial error. She was attacking a position Paul had spent years fortifying. Don, activate the perimeter sensors. Carrie, Troy, remember what we discussed. No one fires until I give the word. Paul's phone rang. Jefferson again. Enjoying the view, Paul? It's peaceful up here. Good place for a final conversation. Indeed. I have to admit, I'm impressed. Most targets don't choose their own execution ground so thoughtfully. Paul watched Jefferson's team spread out through his thermal cameras. Professional deployment, covering all possible escape routes. Tell me something, Corinne. Was any of it real? The whole elaborate setup, or just another Tuesday at the office? You were a means to an end, nothing more. A convenient scapegoat for operations that required deniability. Jefferson's voice carried no emotion. The weapons cache I've been managing represents billions in potential black market value. Enough to fund off-books operations for decades. Except there is no cache. Never was. Silence on the line. Then, excuse me. The Sarajevo weapons were destroyed 15 years ago, just like the official report stated. The Swiss accounts you've been looting? Honeypot operations set up by intelligence agencies to trap arms dealers. You've been stealing imaginary money to buy weapons that don't exist. Paul could hear heated discussion in the background. Jefferson arguing with her associates. Confusion replacing confidence. You're lying. Call your team in Bosnia. Ask them what they found in that warehouse. More silence. Paul used the pause to coordinate with Don through hand signals. The FBI team was moving into position, surrounding Jefferson's forces. The accounts were real, Jefferson said finally. The money transfers were tracked by the Treasury Department from the moment you accessed them. Corinne, you've been under investigation for 8 months. This whole operation was designed to give you enough rope to hang yourself. Paul heard Jefferson's sharp intake of breath. That's impossible. My sources in the department were feeding you information we wanted you to have. Every contact, every supposedly classified document, every piece of intelligence that led you to me. All carefully constructed to make you commit federal crimes while being monitored by people who could actually stop you. The truth hit Jefferson like a physical blow. Paul could hear her cursing, the sound of equipment being thrown. Even if that's true, she said finally, you're still going to die tonight. I have enough conventional weapons to level that cabin and everyone in it. Maybe. But you'll have to explain to a congressional hearing committee why you murdered a federal witness while under surveillance by 3 different agencies. Paul heard vehicles starting, Jefferson's team beginning to withdraw. She'd realized the trap too late. This isn't over, Harper. Yes, it is. Paul nodded to Don, who activated the final component of their defense system, industrial-grade floodlights that turn night into day, eliminating Jefferson's tactical advantage while highlighting her team's positions for the approaching FBI agents. The mountain erupted in controlled chaos. Federal agents moved in from 3 directions, using loudspeakers to demand surrender. Jefferson's mercenaries, caught between prepared defenses and superior numbers, had few options. Most chose surrender. Corinne Jefferson did not. Paul watched through his scope as she broke from her team, running toward the cabin with a satchel that likely contained enough explosives to destroy the building. She moved with desperate efficiency, a professional who'd chosen mutual destruction over capture. Don, take the shot, Paul ordered. She's in civilian clothing, no clear weapon visible. Rules of engagement. She's carrying explosives toward a building containing federal witnesses. Take the shot. Don's rifle cracked once. Jefferson stumbled but kept moving, protected by body armor. She made it to the cabin's front porch before Paul met her. They faced each other in the glare of the floodlights, the decorated veteran and the rogue operative, each representing different versions of American power. The satchel, Corinne. Drop it. Jefferson smiled, blood trickling from a head wound where Don's bullet had grazed her. You know what the beautiful thing about this whole operation was, Paul? It almost worked. If you'd been just a little less paranoid, a little more trusting, you'd be dead and I'd be halfway to retirement with enough money to buy a small country. But I wasn't. And you're not. No. But I can still take you with me. Jefferson's hand moved toward the satchel's detonator. Paul fired twice, center mass, before she could complete the motion. She fell backward off the porch, the explosive device rolling safely away from the building. Agent Green appeared at Paul's side as federal agents secured the scene. Is it over? Green asked. Paul looked around at his mountain property, scarred by floodlights and tactical deployment, but still standing. His family was safe. The truth was documented. Justice had been served. Yeah, it's over. Epilogue, 3 months later. Paul sat on his cabin's rebuilt porch, watching Troy practice tactical shooting with Don's guidance. The young man had officially changed his name to Troy Harper and was applying to military academies, determined to serve his country with the same honor as his chosen father. Carrie emerged from the cabin with coffee, settling beside Paul on the swing they'd installed where Corinne Jefferson had made her final stand. Any word from Agent Green? She asked. Congressional hearing concluded yesterday. Jefferson's entire network rolled up, stolen funds recovered, and enough evidence to keep prosecutors busy for years. Paul accepted the coffee gratefully. Best part? The weapons cache she thought she was stealing never existed. The whole thing was a counterintelligence operation designed to identify corrupt officials. So you were working for the government all along? Not exactly. But when suspicious activity was detected around the Swiss accounts, certain people reached out to certain other people, and suddenly I had a chance to help catch a very dangerous woman. Carrie leaned against him. And us? Are we going to be okay? Paul considered the question. Their marriage had been tested by betrayal, deception, and violence. But it had also been strengthened by truth, forgiveness, and shared survival. We're going to be fine. Different, but fine. Troy approached the porch, rifle slung professionally over his shoulder. Paul, Don says I'm ready for advanced training. Something about learning to breach doors and clear rooms. Paul smiled. Kid, you've already breached enough doors for one lifetime. But if you want to learn proper techniques, we can arrange it. Really? Really? But first, you need to pass your college entrance exams. The military likes smart soldiers. Troy grinned. The same expression Paul saw in his own mirror, but now genuine rather than surgically crafted. Thanks, Dad. The word hung in the mountain air, natural and earned rather than forced or fabricated. Paul had never expected to have a son, but fate and federal conspiracy had given him exactly what he needed. A family forged not by blood, but by choice and shared courage. Don joined them on the porch, carrying his own coffee and a tablet full of new security contracts. Business is booming, he announced. Apparently, successfully stopping a rogue government operative while protecting civilian witnesses is good for the company reputation. Any interesting cases? Corporate espionage, missing persons, standard stuff. But I did get a call from the Pentagon. They're interested in hiring us as consultants for a new counterintelligence initiative. Paul laughed. Think I'll pass. I've had enough of government work for a while. As the sun set behind the Colorado mountains, Paul reflected on the events that had brought them to this moment. A hospital call about a son he'd never had led to the discovery of a son he'd chosen to keep. A wife's betrayal had revealed a love worth fighting for. And an enemy from his past had provided the chance to protect the future he wanted to build. Troy was already making plans for military academy applications. Carrie was researching graduate programs in psychology, claiming she wanted to help people who'd been manipulated like she had been. Don was expanding Harper Security into a legitimate competitor for the major firms. And Paul was finally content to be exactly who he'd always been. A protector, a problem solver, and now a father and husband who'd earned those titles through fire rather than accident of birth. His phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, old paranoia flared, but it was just Agent Green, checking in as he did weekly. All quiet on the federal front. How's retirement treating you? Paul typed back, better than I expected. Thanks for asking. He put the phone away and pulled Carrie closer, watching Troy and Don plan their next training exercise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new people to protect. But tonight, on his rebuilt porch overlooking the mountains where he'd faced down a rogue operative and chosen his own family, Paul Harper was exactly where he belonged. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.